Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for the fourth week of the RISE Institute and Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group 2026 Sports Science Series.
So today I'll be presenting a review on energy drinks and sports performance, cardiovascular risk and genetic associations, future prospects by Gutierrez Helin and Varias Delgado. And this was published in Nutrients in 2021. So as a background, energy drinks have surged in popularity, especially among adolescents and athletes, and it is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. The sale of energy drinks are not restricted, so there are no age limits, so they're readily accessible to all populations, including athletes of any ages. And the two main ergogenic ingredients driving this popularity are caffeine and taurine. Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant that increases alertness, focus, and energy. And taurine is a little bit less well known, and it's a naturally produced amino acid that's synthetically manufactured in energy drinks. It functions as an inhibitory neurotransmitter and plays a role in osmoregulation, which helps to control muscle fatigue. The regular consumption of caffeine can be linked to elevated blood pressure, tachycardia, and anxiety. Um, and there are a few genetic components that can impact how individuals respond to caffeine, including the genes CYP1A2 and ADORA2A, which I will go more into detail on in the later slides. Okay. So this study aims to classify recent research according to their associations between energy drinks and the following three domains: athletic performance, cardiovascular risk, and genetics and future prospects. So the overall goal is to synthesize what's known about energy drinks, and to identify where research still needs to go. So since this article is a literature review, there are a few parameters for the papers that they used. So they focused on randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials across a range of different sports, and these studies were organized into three categories. So table one of the journal showed the category of sports performance, and then cardiovascular risk factors during exercise, and table two showed genetic associations. A few key dosing parameters come up a lot throughout the paper. So the optimal ergogenic caffeine dose range is 3 to 6 milligrams per kilograms of caffeine. And the typical caffeine dose per energy drink is 40 to 350 milligrams. And the most common studied dose of taurine is 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams. And the upper caffeine limit for healthy adults is 400 milligrams per day. So, in terms of athletic performance, there were a few positive associations reported. So, in a study regarding rugby sevens, um, energy drinks increased jump power from 23.5 kilowatts to 25.6 kilowatts, and increased running pace from 87.5 meters per minute up to 95.4, and it increased the sprint pace from 4.6 meters per minute to 6.1. In other sports such as volleyball and soccer, there was also improvement shown in counter movement jump height, sprint speed, and faster time trials, specifically in swimming and cycling. Um, this isn't universally positive, though. In esports, only working memory improved, and hand grip and finger tap speed showed no um, significant difference in race times versus placebo. And several strength and power studies in football and resistance training found no anaerobic power gains. Also, in time to exhaustion treadmill tests, there was no consistent improvement. In terms of cardiovascular risk, um, The lethal and toxic doses found were about 5 grams of caffeine, which is equivalent to 42 cups of coffee. And an acute intake of 3 grams can cause serious effects, most commonly fatal arrhythmia. Oops, sorry. Okay. Um, in terms of measured effects, energy drinks can raise diastolic blood pressure by more than 8% and alter heart rate in healthy young adults. And there's also a risk when combining substances. So caffeine combined with ephedra or ephedrine significantly raises systolic blood pressure and heart rate beyond either substance alone. And there have been no severe adverse um, effects recorded in athletes at the doses currently used because they're under WADA monitoring since caffeine's removal from the prohibited list in 2004. In terms of genetics and future prospects, one of the genes I mentioned before, CYP1A2, is responsible for the production of a liver enzyme, which metabolizes caffeine. The AA genotype often shows a greater ergogenic response in endurance cycling, but the effects are far less consistent in team and power sports. For example, in handball and basketball studies, there was minimal or no genotype interaction to caffeine reaction. And Adora 2A um, is controls the adenosine A2A receptor, which is linked to sleep and anxiety sensitivity. So this plays a role in sleep-wake activity and sensitivity to caffeine-induced anxiety. There is no clear, consistent relationship found with athletic performance. However, there were cases of self-reported insomnia and excess activity noted in handball players with the genotype TT. Looking forward, the authors suggest genetic scoring across multiple hepatic metabolism genes. And there is a future direction that could enable more personalized caffeine dosing strategies down the line. Okay. So caffeine's mechanism works by blocking adenosine receptors in the central nervous system, which delays fatigue. And this increases motor neuron recruitment, fat oxidation, and adrenaline release. Taurine appears to act on calcium handling in muscle tissue, and this may enhance caffeine's effects synergistically, particularly in cardiac and skeletal muscles. A 27 systematic review and meta-analysis confirmed significant improvement in strength, jumps, and endurance test with taurine-containing drinks, specifically showing amplified effects compared to caffeine alone. But it is worth noting that studies without a positive effect may reflect subjects who were already habituated to caffeine or just small underpowered sample sizes. And overall, genetics only partially explains the individual variability that we see in response. A few important limitations to keep in mind are that with studies varying widely in design, such as sample size, dose, and sport, um, the comparison among findings is limited. Also, since this is a literature review, a lot of the evidence is skewed towards male-only cohorts, with 22 of the studies being male-only, 3 being female-only, and 11 with mixed athletes. It is also important to note that genetic association studies are generally small, so this can limit their statistical power. And additionally, long-term and chronic effects of high-dose caffeine and taurine intake in children and adolescents remain unknown, which is a very meaningful gap because these products are very unrestricted. Um, so some key takeaways are that energy drinks with caffeine and taurine produce real measurable performance gains across many sports. However, these results are not universal, with exceptions in esports and anaerobic activity. There is significant cardiovascular risk with energy drinks. And this is particularly at a high dose or when combined with other substances. But moderate intake, which is less than or equal to 400 milligrams of caffeine per day, appears low risk for healthy adults. The CYP1A2 genotype shows to be the most promising link to individual caffeine response, but this is again more significant in endurance sports. And in the future, studies will be directed on personalized genetics informed dosing, but this will require larger studies and cohorts before any clinical application. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Are there any questions, or Dr. Lopez, would you have anything to add?
Any questions? No questions, anyone? No questions. All right. So let's clarify. So can you go to your first slide? I think it was like literally on your first slide. It broke down the what was healthy and what we were encountering in these energy drinks. I think it's almost staggering when you start looking at the numbers of the amount of milligrams, almost grams in some of them. Meanwhile, at 3 grams, you're causing a heart attack potentially, arrhythmias minimally, or, affecting the system and metabolically. So, Atlanta, please share again. I just,
Yeah, so the typical caffeine dose per energy drink, they range a lot, but it's 40 to 350 milligrams.
yes, that's
Yeah.
one drink. I understand that. But then if you bring up your slide, it would be best. This way I can get to my point. The idea is that you're saying that 400 milligrams is a healthy amount.
Um,
You can go to slideshow and then just go to slideshow and then just go all the way back to the first slide. No, we're just talking here so we can learn about stuff, okay?
okay.
So yeah. Next one. Next. Yeah. So caffeine dose ranging is 3 to 6 milligrams. So you're saying just a cup of coffee or a caffeine dose range is 3 to 6 milligrams, because I do believe they also have the ranges. What,
Um,
right? This is the energy drink, the 40 to 350. So it varies depending on the company, etc., or whatever it is. I get, but just envision that you're already at the top of the arc of healthiness, yeah? And they're colorful, they're very vibrant. The the Munster cans are all pink, neon green, very attractive, very enticing. So just two of those, you're pretty much kind of getting to the 1 gram. And I do believe some people do use it more often. Now, obviously, does anyone have an idea of what a cup of coffee, or particularly uh, Starbucks, right? Gram caffeine?
I think it's in one of the later slides, it said I wrote that around like 42 cups of coffee is the limit, so
No,
it would
no.
be a lot
So
less than
just
that.
clarify.
Yeah.
No, don't go. Okay, Elena, put it on the slide we're on.
Okay.
Don't worry. We're educating. So, right, venti grande, whatever you want to call it. Right, the large one is 410 milligrams. 410 milligrams. So you have already passed your typical healthy dose of 400 milligrams. If you understand, with just 1 cup of Starbucks, and then 50 cents for a refill, it's easy to get a second one, right? So you're already cranking at 800 milligrams. I personally can't drink Starbucks because I get like crazy. You know, I'm already hyper as it is. Can you imagine with me a Starbucks in me? You know, that's why I drink green tea, and I drink uh, you know, basically chamomile tea because I don't need any more. So what I'm trying to tell you is that in your daily and probably university setting, you have to be very careful because your intake may exceed your healthy dosing. And you have to be very careful about that. So, and trust me, you may need the coffee. You know, I know I definitely did. You know, when you're not sleeping, you need to just drink coffee. There's really no way around it. But you're burning so many calories that it doesn't really matter because you're up for so long. All right. So I just wanted everyone to see, you know, the upper caffeine limit for healthy adults is 400 milligrams a day. And meanwhile, it goes from 235 milligrams for a tall, then a grande is 330 milligrams. It goes to 410 for venti. Now, I'm not saying, there are other probably coffee brands that are higher in milligram dosings, but you have to be very careful in the dosing ranges, particularly how easy it is to obtain. Right? All right, everyone. Thank you very much, Miss Elena. That was very nice. Like I said, I think it's difficult to really quantitate. There is a certain amount of impact overall. You can come out of the presentation. Thank you, please. There's a certain amount of impact with caffeine stimulants or caffeine intake for performance. They did take it off the WADA lists and all that, caffeine, but there is a problem. When you were presenting on the endurance cycling with the genetic influence of the CYP1A2, a very common, metabolic factor that you're going to know. There are many drugs that influence this when you metabolize, right? So when you take drugs, right, for well-being, for antibiotics, whatever it is, it's metabolized either through the Isabella? What organs metabolize things?
The, the stomach.
Nope, the stomach absorbs.
Mm.
Hunter? He's typing away. He's typing hard. All right. Brandon's smiling because he knows he wants to say. Aaron?
The liver.
Metabolizes or absorbs?
The liver metabolizes things.
And then what filters? Go ahead, Hunter.
Kidneys.
So let's give it, for example, right? You have your two big painkillers, right? Motrin or ibuprofen, right? Ibuprofen and acetaminophen, and aspirin. And acetaminophen, is metabolized or through what? Through the liver. And the ibuprofen is metabolized or filtered through the kidney. But with any one of these drugs, even caffeine is a drug. There's a certain amount of damage that occurs to the organs. So you find a lot of these problems in older folks with pain, chronic pain. They're metabolized, because they got to take them so often just to get around and move. So now you have problems with that. So what I'm trying to get to is that caffeine is filtered through the kidney, but it functions as what? What does caffeine function like? What does it do? Good, Jack?
It's an inhibitor.
Nope. What happens when you drink coffee? You go,
The stimulant.
nope. It's a stimulant, yeah, but it's a diuretic. So it makes you lose water. That's why at Starbucks, right, they have the water station next to the sugar and all that. So this way you're supposed to drink, a glass of water with every cup of coffee, or 2 glasses of water for every cup of coffee, because you lose a certain amount of fluids on that. So just imagine, 5-hour energy, or one of those small little bottles of concentrate. What does a 5-hour energy have in it? What kind of caffeine dosing?
Regular strength has 200 milligrams. Extra strength has 230 to 242.
So 5-hour energy, with 2 of those, you've already tapped on a healthy cup of, beyond your healthy caffeine intake. But you're also now, inducing, diuresis. You're going to be peeing out all your fluids, and therefore you're going to be, what am I looking for? If you're getting rid of all your fluids, you're going to be, go ahead, Jordan, I know you're excited to say something.
Dehydrated.
Bingo. There's a fine line of stimulating performance, if that's the best way of saying it, but also retaining the amount of water you need. Okay? So it's a real tightrope act. All right? Let's proceed, because we're running out of time. We have 15 minutes to do 2 presentations. Let's dance.
Our second intern is Jordan Hall, who will be presenting multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements, safety implications, and performance outcomes.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Jordan Hall. I'm an incoming senior at Kent Place High School in Summit, New Jersey. Pre-workout supplements, often referred to as MIPS or multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements, have become increasingly popular among athletes and recreational exercisers. Unlike single-ingredient supplements, MIPS combine several ingredients such as caffeine, creatine, beta-alanine, amino acids, vitamins, and herbal extracts that are intended to work together to improve exercise performance. Although these products are widely marketed to increase energy, strength, focus, and endurance, many formulas differ significantly in both ingredients and dosage. This variation raises important questions about whether these supplements are actually effective and whether they're safe for regular use. As a result, researchers have become more invested in evaluating the scientific evidence supporting both the performance benefits and the potential health risks associated with these supplements. The purpose of this review was to examine the current scientific literature on multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements, also known as MIPS. The authors wanted to determine whether these supplements improve exercise performance, identify any reported safety concerns, and evaluate whether the ingredient and dosages used in commercial products are supported by scientific evidence. Ultimately, the goal was to provide athletes, coaches, healthcare professionals, and consumers with evidence-based understanding of the effectiveness and safety of these increasingly popular supplements. Here I have an example of creatine. Rather than conducting their own experiment, the authors performed a narrative review on previously published research shown on the right. They analyzed studies that investigated commercially available multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements and evaluated outcomes related to exercise performance, body composition, strength, endurance, cognitive performance, and reported adverse effects. The review also compared the ingredient profiles of these supplements with established evidence regarding effective dosages, allowing the researchers to assess whether commercial products are formulated according to these current scientific recommendations. The authors found through this research that many studies reported improvements in exercise performance after taking the MIPS, or the multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements. Some of the most consistent benefits included increase in muscular endurance, training volume, subjective energy levels, focus, and in some cases we saw strength and power output. However, the magnitude of these improvements varied considerably between studies because different supplements contain different ingredient combinations and dosages. The review also found that many commercial products either underdosed or overdosed their ingredients, making it very, very difficult to determine which ingredients were responsible for the observed performance benefits. Regarding safety, healthy adults generally tolerated these supplements well when used as directed, but products containing high doses of stimulants, particularly caffeine, which we just talked about, were more likely to produce side effects such as increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure, anxiety, insomnia, and just discomfort in general. The authors conclude that the multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements appear to provide modest performance benefits for many healthy individuals, particularly during resistance training and high-intensity exercise. However, because these supplements contain multiple active ingredients, it remains difficult to identify which components are actually responsible for the observed improvements. The authors also emphasize that manufacturers often use proprietary blends, making it difficult for consumers and researchers to know the exact dosages of each ingredient and even what each ingredient is. Overall, they recommend interpreting performance claims with caution and encouraging future research to use standardizing supplement formulations and in longer study durations. Throughout the study, there were several limitations, and the first one was the studies used many different supplement formulations, making direct comparison difficult. Second, most research involved young, healthy adults, so findings might not apply to older adults, adolescents, or individuals with medical conditions. Many of the studies were also relatively short in duration, meaning that the long-term safety and effectiveness remain very unclear. Finally, because the supplements often contain proprietary blends, researchers cannot always determine the specific contribution of each ingredient to performance outcomes. Here we see just an ingredient list, and I don't think anyone would be able to read that if it was on the back of a creatine bottle or anything like that. In conclusion, this review suggests that multi-ingredient pre-workout supplements can improve certain aspects of exercise performance, particularly muscular endurance, training volume, and perceived energy. However, not all products are formulated equally, and many contain ingredient dosages that differ from those supported by scientific research. Most healthy adults appear to tolerate these supplements when used responsibly, but high stimulant doses may increase the risk of adverse effects. As we just talked about, if one consumes too much caffeine, it could give them crazy side effects. Overall, the authors recommend that consumers carefully evaluate supplement labels and additional long-term research be conducted to better understand both the effectiveness and safety of these products. If you want to look further into the article I read, here's my references, and thank you. I will now take questions or comments.
Thank you for that amazing presentation. Are there any questions, or Dr. Lopez, do you have anything to add?
No, I just let me see if I'm not mute. Okay. Yes, thank you so much. It was a good presentation. Just want everyone to understand that there's not only the MIPS, but there's also the MINSA, right? There's multi-ingredient nutritional supplements as well. So there's two types of them. But with anything in a supplement, a lot of it's not FDA managed or observed. So you have to be very, very careful about how you use the product. All right. Next. Good. Thank you so much, Jordan.
All right. Next, we have Natalia presenting on effectiveness of KT technology tape.
Hello, my name is Natalia. I'm a rising senior at Villanova University, and today I will be presenting on is taping effective for sports performance and ankle function for athletes with chronic ankle instability. So just some background. To begin, ankle sprains are one of the most common sports injuries amongst athletes. They often occur most frequently in adolescence, followed by women and then men. These injuries are most common in indoor and court sports. Among athletes with a history of ankle sprains, recurrent sprains are most prevalent in soccer players, while track and field athletes have the highest rates of chronic ankle instability. Around 70% of ankle sprains occur during competitions or games, while the remaining 30 occur during practices. This is mainly because competitions place a greater physical demand on the athletes. One of the biggest concerns with chronic ankle instability is that about 46% of athletes with a history of ankle sprains go on to develop it. This is a pretty large percentage, and a lot of research has gone in to kind of reduce that number. One of the more common things that has been coming up for this injury is KT taping. It is an elastic therapeutic tape that provides external support while still allowing a full range of motion. Because of its ability to provide stability without restricting too much movement, it has become more popular as treatment options. So, what is chronic ankle instability? It is a condition that is developed after repeated ankle sprains. When an ankle sprain does not heal properly, the ankle feels unstable and can repeatedly give way. This means that the supporting ligaments become stretched and reduce their ability to stabilize the joint. Chronic ankle instability is not just structural damage to the ligaments. Repeated ankle sprains can also impact the prospection of the ankle, and this means that the position and movement becomes impaired. When this occurs, balance decreases and muscle responses become slower. So, in many cases, when athletes are making sharp turns, such as in basketball or soccer, without the proper support to the ankle, it will cause another ankle sprain to occur. The author also does identify, sorry, if you could go, thank you, also identifies that high BMI participation in high-risk sports and not wearing proper ankle support in those high-risk sports can also lead to more ankle sprains. So, as it said at the title, this was a systematic review and meta-analysis. This is the framework that the authors used to gather their data. This was not a new experiment. They used data that was collected from other articles. So, to begin, there were about 1,400 articles that they started with, and as they went through, they removed duplicates and screened it for specific criteria, such as if it wasn't written in English, it was not moved on. After their criteria, there were about 12 articles left. And after the review of all 12 of those articles, only 8 made the cut of being included in the research. So in this chart, it shows the 8 articles that were included. And the researchers analyzed data from 270 athletes, including 171 males and 99 females. These participants were young adults with an average age of 18 to 24. And the study included athletes from a variety of sports, as you can see. There were football, basketball, baseball, badminton, a whole range. In terms of the study's quality, 7 of the 8 studies were randomized design or randomized control trials, which represent high scientific evidence. Only one of them was a cross-control study. And overall, the studies included athletes with chronic ankle instability and evaluated how KT affected ankle function and performance. So the results of the data based on the articles they used found that KT had the greatest impact on ankle function rather than overall athletic performance. The researchers found significant improvements in gait function, which refers to the mechanisms, coordination, and rhythm of how someone walks and moves. So as you can see, it increased walking speed as well as the step and stride length. Another important factor was that KT reduced excessive innervation of the ankle and had it more centered and allowed for more balance for the individual. However, KT tape did not significantly improve agility or landing performance. Because of these findings, the authors concluded that KT provides a moderate stabilizing effect on the ankle. However, it does not serve as a permanent solution or as a treatment option alone. Some limitations from the study were that there were only 8 studies used that could be included. And with that, there is not a lot of general ability in these findings. There was also no standardized taping technique amongst the 8 studies. So there was various tape placement, tension, direction, and application within all of these studies. Each study measured different outcomes. Although they were able to include them all in their findings, they did not all initially examine the same thing. And most studies evaluated the short-term effects rather than the long-term. So there's still a lot of research that needs to go in on whether it is an effective treatment plan or an effective tool to use with PT and other rehab. And lastly, just kind of the key findings. KT provides a moderate stabilizing effect for athletes. It improves ankle function by enhancing gait mechanisms and reducing excessive ankle motion. It is also used as an addition to physical therapy. It is not a treatment plan, but it can help. And there needs to be more standardized long-term studies done on this to see the optimal taping techniques and to see if it's effective long-term. Thank you. And these are the rest of the reference of the article if you would like to look more into it.
Thank you, Natalia, for your great presentation. That will conclude week 4 of the RISE Institute and Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group Sports Science Series. Thank you all for attending.